Every summer for 11 years, my parents sent me away, so my sister could have real family vacations, and the last time they tried to do it, I simply never came back. I was 17, when my mother zipped my suitcase shut without looking at me. The sound was final, mechanical, like sealing something disposable. In the background, I could hear my sister laughing, her voice echoing through the hallway as she argued over which beach dress to pack. My father stood by the door, keys already in hand, impatient. Not one of them asked if I wanted to stay. They never did. At my aunt's house, the routine was always the same. A polite smile at the door, a spare room that smelled like dust and lavender, and long, silent afternoons where time stretched thin. Meanwhile, my parents posted photos, sunlit dinners, matching outfits, captions about family time. I learned to recognize the pattern. I was edited out long before the pictures were taken. But that summer, something shifted when I watched my mother wave goodbye already, turning back toward the car. Before I stepped inside, I realized they weren't sending me away. They were erasing me. I was the older child, but never the priority. My sister Layla was 3 years younger, and somehow always more charming, more deserving, more visible. My parents didn't say it outright. They didn't need to. It showed in the way her mistakes were laughed off while mine were corrected, in how her preferences shaped every plan while mine were treated as inconveniences. The summer trip started when I was 6. At first, I thought it was a reward. Time with my aunt in her quiet house at the edge of a small town. But patterns reveal themselves if you sit still long enough. Every year, the same sequence. I was packed early, dropped off quickly, and forgotten just as fast. No calls unless my aunt reminded them. No postcards, just curated photos online where the word family somehow excluded me. I adapted the way invisible people do. I became easy, quiet, useful. I learned to fold my own needs into something small enough, not to disrupt anyone. At school, I excelled, not for praise, but for control. Numbers made sense. Effort had predictable outcomes. Unlike home, by the time I turned 16, I stopped expecting anything to change. Instead, I started paying attention, saving money from part-time jobs, collecting documents, building a version of myself that didn't rely on being remembered. They thought I was being sent away. I was learning how to leave. The last few years before I left were quieter, but sharper. It showed in small moments, the kind no one else would notice. At dinner, my father would pass dishes past me without meeting my eyes, asking Layla what she wanted while my plate stayed half empty. If I reached for something, there was always a pause, a subtle shift, like I had interrupted a scene I wasn't part of. My mother had a way of correcting me mid-sentence, not harshly, just enough to redirect attention. A slight tilt of her head, a soft, "That's not quite right," followed by Layla, finishing the story instead. Everyone would listen then. I learned to stop halfway through my own thoughts. On my 17th birthday, they planned a trip. Not for me, for her. I remember standing in the doorway, watching suitcases lined neatly by the stairs. Mine wasn't there yet. It would be packed later, separately, like always. "Your aunt's expecting you," my mother said, glancing at her phone. Not unkind, just efficient. I nodded. Of course she was. That night I overheard them laughing in the kitchen, discussing reservations, outfits, places I had never seen. My name didn't come up once. It wasn't cruelty. That would have been easier to confront. It was precision, the quiet, consistent exclusion that left no mark anyone else could see. The decision didn't arrive all at once. It settled in slowly, like something inevitable finally taking shape. It happened a week before my graduation. I came home earlier than expected and found them in the living room. Brochures spread across the table. Another trip already planned. My name wasn't on anything, but that wasn't new. What caught me off guard was how casually it was discussed, like a detail already finalized. "We'll drop you off on Sunday," my father said, not looking up. "Your aunt's fine with it." Sunday, 2 days after my ceremony. I stood there for a moment, diploma form still in my hand, waiting, out of habit, for someone to pause, to reconsider, to notice that this time should have been different. My graduation, a milestone I had worked toward quietly, without their help. My mother glanced at me then briefly. "It's easier this way," she added, her tone gentle, almost reassuring. Easier. Something in me shifted, not anger, not even disappointment. Just clarity, a clean, quiet understanding that nothing I achieved would ever change the role they had already assigned me. I nodded the way I always did. But that night, I filled out the final acceptance form for an out-of-state program I hadn't told them about, paid the deposit, arranged housing. For the first time, I wasn't waiting to be included. I was making sure I couldn't be excluded. Planning didn't feel like rebellion. It felt like administration. I treated my exit the same way. I treated everything that had ever worked for me, methodically. I gathered my documents first. Birth certificate. Social security records, academic transcripts. Not stolen, not hidden. Just quietly relocated into a folder that stayed with me. I opened a separate bank account months earlier, redirecting earnings from my part-time job and small academic stipends. No dramatic gestures, just clean separation. The out-of-state program wasn't prestigious enough to impress them, which made it perfect. It offered housing, work study, and most importantly, distance. I confirmed my acceptance, secured my room, and arranged a start date that overlapped neatly with the trip they had planned without me. I studied lease agreements, residency rules, and forwarding protocols. By the time graduation arrived, my mail was already rerouted, my number scheduled to change, my digital footprint reduced to what I chose to keep. I didn't leave a note. There was nothing to explain that hadn't already been understood. On Sunday, when they expected to drop me off at my aunt's house, my room was already empty, not erased, transferred entirely under my control. I didn't watch them realize. By the time they pulled into my aunt's driveway, I was already 3 states away, the bus window reflecting a version of me they had never seen. Unreachable, uninterrupted. My phone buzzed once as we crossed the state line. I turned it off before checking. Later, my aunt told me how it unfolded, how my mother knocked lightly at the door, already half turned toward the car, expecting routine. How confusion replaced that quiet efficiency when my aunt said, "She's not here." A pause. Then another, longer one. My father stepping forward, voice tightening. Not loud, just controlled. Asking questions no one there could answer. They called my number. It rang once before disconnecting. After that, nothing. I imagined the drive back. No music this time. The empty space in the back seat where I used to sit. Unnoticed but expected. The absence finally visible. I didn't respond to their emails. Not immediately. When I did, weeks later, it was brief. No accusations, no explanations. Just a confirmation that I was safe, enrolled, and not coming back. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was structural. For the first time, they were the ones outside the picture, left with gaps they couldn't edit, and a version of family that no longer included me. The reactions arrived in fragments, not all at once. My aunt called first, not to question me, but to understand the shape of what I had done. Her voice carried something unfamiliar. Respect, edged with concern. "You should have told me," she said quietly. I almost answered, almost explained. Instead, I thanked her for everything she had done over the years. It felt more honest than an apology. My parents took longer. Their messages shifted over time, confusion, then urgency, then something softer that read like revision. They asked where I was, what they had done, why I hadn't trusted them. The questions sounded careful, as if phrased for an audience that wasn't there. For the first time, they were the ones trying to be understood. Relatives began to notice the absence. At gatherings, my name came up in lowered voices, wrapped in speculation. Some framed it as independence. Others called it distance. No one used the word it actually was, consequence. I read their messages without responding, measuring the distance I had created. It wasn't anger that kept me quiet. It was accuracy. For years, I had been treated as optional, present when convenient, absent when not. Now the equation had reversed, and the result unsettled them. What mattered wasn't that I left. It was that I left without asking, and proved I had never needed permission. For a long time, I thought closure would sound like an apology. It didn't. It sounded like my own footsteps. Crossing a campus no one there had ever walked with me before. It looked like mornings that belonged entirely to me. No quiet exclusions, no careful shrinking, to fit someone else's version of enough. The silence I carried with me wasn't empty anymore. It was chosen. They still reach out sometimes. Messages spaced months apart, softer each time, as if they're learning a language they never needed before. I read them without urgency. I answer when I decide to, and only what I decide to. Not out of punishment, just balance. Layla sent a message once, short, uncertain, not the voice I remembered. I replied with the same calm distance I've learned to keep. Not rejection, not reconciliation, just something honest and unforced. I don't hate them. That would keep me tied to a version of myself I've already outgrown. Instead, I built something quieter, a life where I am not optional, where presence isn't negotiated or earned through silence. The future isn't a place I'm waiting to be invited into anymore. It's a space I already occupy, fully, deliberately. And if they ever look for me in the old picture, they won't find me, because I didn't just step out of it. I became the one holding the frame.